Everything Old is New Again, America's entertainment pop culture talk show.
It may well possess a rudimentary intelligence.
I'm trying to think, but nothing happens.
Felt a great disturbance in the force.
Hello, I'm Mr. Red.
Come on, Mark, like a dog for me.
Where's the goodies?
Leave the gun. Take the cannoli.
I bet you wouldn't have done anything like this if Mom and Dad were here.
You filthy criminal.
Excuse me while I whip this out.
Go ahead. Make my day.
Here are your hosts, Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
You just don't get it, do you, Jean-Luc? The trial never ends. We wanted to see if you had the ability to expand your mind and your horizons. And for one brief moment, you did.
When I realized the paradox.
Exactly. For that one fraction of a second, you were open to options you had never considered. That is the exploration that awaits you. Not mapping stars and studying nebula, but charting the unknown possibilities of existence.
The unknown possibilities of existence of Everything Old is New Again is that we have been successful in securing as a special co-host again this weekend a fascinating man who's an actor, director, producer, writer, voice artist, and also, I guess you could say, is best known for his role as Q in Star Trek The Next Generation, also Donald Margolis on Breaking Bad, and the voice of Discord on My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic, and so much more. Welcome back to Everything Old is New Again, John DeLancie. And last week we were discussing a little bit about alien voices, so we're going to continue and pick up that a little bit right here. I love alien voices. I know it goes back a little ways here, but it's still active and online as alienvoices.net, where you can take a look at and listen to, or purchase to listen to, these great, I'll call them radio plays, or dramatizations of these great science fiction works of art. And you did that with Leonard Nimoy. That must have been a tremendous experience, and you used your entrepreneurial skills there, starting this company, if you will, and, of course, choosing these works of art to make come alive. That had us, in some ways, be a dream come true.
It was, and it was also, a somewhat amusing story about that, and that is that I alluded to the fact that the first book that I remember really reading just from cover to cover and being absolutely engrossed was Jules Verne's Mysterious Island. That year, the movie came out, and I was because I couldn't watch, there was no television at home. I would go to the movie theater for the matinees every Saturday, and there it was, Mysterious Island, this book that I now had up on a pedestal of being exactly the type of person that I wanted to become, all on and on and on. I walked in, I sat down, and the first scene is a bunch of dragons, well, not dragons, dinosaurs, whatever you want to call them, fighting on the beach, and I was like, oh my God, this is not in the book. Oh my God. And then the next thing was a raft out of nowhere.
Right.
With a couple of very blousy women
right.
just arriving.
Right.
And I stood up. I was maybe 12 years old. I stood up and announced to the entire auditorium of kids my age,
right.
This is not the story. This is not the story. And I got collared and thrown out. And so when I, many years later, when I directed Leonard in the Orson Welles
War of the Worlds.
War of the Worlds.
Right.
Afterwards, I said, "Did you enjoy yourself?" And he said, "I had a great time." And I said, "Leonard, I have this idea of creating audio books. In other words, doing an audio play of some of the great classic works. And what's really important to me is that I want to do them in a way so that if the author were ever to have been able to hear it, which they were all dead, but in any case, if they could hear it, they would recognize their story."
Right. And that's what I noticed about them, because, there's stuff you expect when you hear these titles from Alien Voices, and you don't hear that, but you hear something instead. The real story is, of course, better most, if not all of the time, than these adaptations in the movies,
And one of the things in which I've always had great satisfaction from, and that is that I would bring them back. We would record them, and then they would go into post, which obviously there's the editing, but there's also the music and the sound effects and all that type of stuff. And I would bring a version, probably pretty close to being a locked version, back to the house. And my sons at that age were maybe, 8 and 10 or something of that nature. And they would have friends over, and I would say, hey, guys, you want to hear, Lost Worlds? I'll go, yeah. So I would put Lost World on, and here they would be in the living room, with their just kind of staring into space, as it were.
Right.
Quietly listening. And these shows were long. They were 2 hours long. And then at the end I'd go, well, how was it? Oh, we loved it. We loved the fact. What part did you like? We loved the fact when the pterodactyl came down and grabbed the guy and took him off into the mountains and stuff like that. And I go, oh, that's interesting. Well, point of fact, that scene was not there. They had created that.
Right. So
they had filled in this gestalt that we had done, and that's one of the marvelous things about radio. It's also the marvelous thing about imagination, and that is that you take it and and if it really works, you kind of run with it. And so that was always something that I've looked back on with great pleasure.
See, now this is brings up it was a shot in the dark here. I have a 10 and a 7-year-old. And recently I've introduced them to Radio Mystery Theater, which is a show that was on the air.
Sure.
Okay, well, way back when we've had people from that show on our show. I absolutely love it.
Yeah.
And they're starting to get into it, and it really rings a bell that I'm glad that I had you on, because I've purchased and enjoyed Alien Voices from alienvoices.net, by the way. For the longest time since they've come out, I play them in the car and so forth. I bring them out every so often. I love the theater of the mind, of course. I mean, radio and all that. But my kids are going to love this because they've been introduced to that. It's such a new, to them, with the internet, the phones and all this, a new way of entertaining is to sit and listen, whether you're doing a puzzle, whether you're sitting in the dark, whether you're planting something, and whatever, but to hear the theater of the mind being developed through Alien Voices and these stories is amazing. It must have been really satisfying to have that experience with your children.
Very much so. And you mentioned, sitting in the dark. One of the things in which I directed half dozen or more operas, and one of the things in which I always enjoyed was this notion that I was going down to my office to turn on the music and to sit in the dark with my eyes closed, imagining a show, and I would do it over and over again, and it would be like creating like an onion. The first layer was to hear the story. Then the second layer was just in my mind to move actors around the stage and to imagine what the scene is. And then the third is to imagine what the lighting would be and what have you. And so I've gotten a great deal of pleasure out of that notion of being able to close your eyes and see things.
Right, exactly. And it's something that I think we've lost because you need to slow down, turn off these devices, and just relax to allow that to happen. And we're sort of not doing that all the time, which is the reason why I think we exist on some level. Everything Old is New Again. We try to do that also. We do some characters sometimes. We do quizzes. We don't always do celebrity interviews. We're not always as privileged as we are today to have some time with John DeLancie, but we hope that we're bringing something different to the radio. Other than right now, it's basically music, medical talk, political talk, sports talk, and kind of that's about it, and news. So I think there's much more that can be done with the radio. I presume you agree with that.
I do agree with that.
There we go. And we're going to continue to do that here on Everything Old is New Again for quite some time to come. And we will continue to try to make radio fun and do something different here on Everything Old is New Again with John DeLancie, Q himself. We'll be back right after this on Everything Old is New Again.
You're listening to Everything Old is New Again, America's entertainment pop culture talk show with Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
We are back with John DeLancie here on Everything Old is New Again. I know that you're working on something new now, and I wonder if you could explore that with us a little bit and see what we can look forward to from John DeLancie.
Well, I'm working on a play a number of years ago now. Everything seems to be a number of years ago. About 10 years ago, I went out on the road with Ed Asner on a play about the Scopes monkey trial. And it was the actual trial transcripts. It was not Inherit the Wind. It was the trial transcripts. And it was fascinating. It was my first introduction into really understanding what the Scopes trial was about, and it was my first introduction in certain parts of the country, and not necessarily the Bible Belt, but where an audience, where the audience would get up and scream, you're going to hell, and all this type of stuff. So it was an exciting tour, and we did it, I think, 3 times. We'd go off for about 3 weeks each year, that type of thing. And in one place, I had really a seminal moment, and that is that we would have to. We did the college circuit, and they have great theaters in these colleges, and so it was good. And the idea was that at every college, somebody would go and speak. So this particular college, I ended up having to go and speak. It was the University of Nebraska, and I went and spoke to the acting students, and there were maybe about 100 of them. And at the end of the program, or at the end of the Q&A, the teacher said to the students, you should take a look. Make sure that you see this show. I saw it last night. It was really interesting. And I think that you would all gain from seeing it. And then he gave me kind of a weird look, and he said, which was kind of a watch this. And then he said, now with a show of hands, how many of you believe that the world was created October 23rd, 4004 BC at 10 o'clock in the morning?
Right.
And about 80 kids raised their hand.
Wow. Out of 100?
Out of 100.
Jeez.
And I was just like, and I didn't, my reaction, I remember my head kind of dropped. I'm looking at my feet now, and I felt all of curiosity leave the room.
Right.
I felt 500 years of the things that I love. Reading about Pasteur and reading about, all these things that I had read about as a kid, wanted to learn about, all the things that we've discovered in the last 500 years just went out the window.
Right.
And so I walked away. I said, thank you very much. And that night, I told the cast, and in the process of telling the cast, there was a girl there who had been helping us. There were a couple of college kids who had been helping, and she was very sweet. And I said to her, whatever her name was, Mary, would you have raised your hand? And she said, oh, absolutely. And I said, well, why is that? She said, well, because God is my bus driver. And I said, Mary, I don't know what that I don't know what that means.
Right.
It means that I can I can go to the back of my bus and party hardy because God is driving my bus.
I still don't get it, but okay.
What's that?
I still don't get it, but okay. Yeah, it's odd.
Well, and I said, and I thought of it as being, I just heard that as a real abdication of one's personal responsibility.
Right.
And that got me into this world, and I thought, wow, this is you're not going to get the people who boldly go
right
in the science community if they think that the world was created less than 10,000 years ago.
Right.
So I began tracking this, and lo and behold, in 2005, there was the Dover Intelligent Design Trial. And I am currently working on that. I will have this script ready to go, as I said before, on March 1st. I have been reading, oh my gosh, thousands of pages of testimony, hundreds of pages of newspaper articles, 4 books. Luckily, I have a person who is helping me, who this is her, she's 2 MAs and a PhD, so she's terrific about all this type of stuff. And so this is my latest passion, and the one in which I want people to hear. And it's an opportunity to hear what science is and what it isn't, and what the issues are. So this is not just some sort of screed on my part. Everyone, those who are very religious and those who are very secular, will walk out of this having learned something.
And we're looking forward to that, because in today's world, there is whatever you want to say. Forget the politics side of it. In science, there are answers, and some of them are solid, and the scientific method works. And those answers where we know what red looks like, we can't say that blue is red and believe it. And so we need to pass that along to our children, that there is some certainty in the world from all the years that humanity's been on the planet and the things that we've learned. So we can't just ignore that and have our children, kind of walk lockstep behind our thoughts that are, that are not supported by evidence, if that makes any sense.
It makes a lot of sense. And one of the things that so concerned me about what the young lady had said to me was, along with the abdication of one's personal responsibilities, also came the whole issue of critical thinking.
Right.
So in any case, that's what I'm working on right now.
And that is from the mouth of John DeLancie, Q himself, from Everything Old is New Again here. It's very interesting for me. It is, as a Star Trek fan, the 5th individual, believe it or not, from Star Trek that has been on a show. We've had Walter Koenig, we've had Peter Weller, Robert Picardo. Upcoming, we've got John Billingsley, and again, we've got John DeLancie. So there's 5 individuals that appeared in one form or another on Star Trek. So we're having a great time enjoying that. Now, if you're interested in this alien voices, I think it's amazing the various shows or productions that they got involved with. First Man in the Moon, Journey to the Center of the Earth, The Invisible Man, Lost World, The Time Machine. Get involved with this. It's good stuff. Alien Voices, if you're into radio and radio plays. By the way, William Shatner makes an appearance in the First Men in the Moon. And Kate Mulgrew, Nana Visitor, and Ethan Phillips in The Invisible Man, and there'll be plenty of others stars in these various performances and productions that you would not realize is in this stuff. It's great work. Now, in addition, just for kicks, Q, the character that John DeLancie created, was ranked the 9th best character of all time in Star Trek by IGN and Time magazine, just for kicks. If you're looking to hear any of our old shows with the old Star Trek people, or anything else that we've talked about over the last 5+ years, 300+ shows, feel free just to go to everythingoldisnewagain.biz. Everythingoldisnewagain.biz. All our old shows are there. You can communicate with us there as well, or you can go to YouTube and look for Everything Old is New Again radio show. Soon we'll be on all the other podcast locations, just working on that now as we speak. But regardless, doesn't matter about the podcast all that much, because you're on your radio station right here, your local radio station. Call them, tell them that you're happy that we're there. We're certainly happy they're there. Give them a call, say, you know what, that Everything Old is New Again's all right, man. It's all right. Anyway, we'll be back with John DeLancie right after this, and Everything Old is New Again.
This is Everything Old is New Again, America's entertainment pop culture talk show with Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
Hi, this is Alan Alda, and you're listening to Everything Old is New Again with Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
There he is, Alan Alda himself. We're here and happy to be with John DeLancie on Everything Old is New Again. And Mr. DeLancie, of course, has appeared in many things other than Star Trek, which you may know him as Q, maybe if that's the one thing that would come to mind. But to me, what comes to mind is a play in 2001 where Alan Alda created a play called The Radiance, the Passion of Marie Curie, and guess who played Madame Curie's husband, Pierre Curie, was none other than John DeLancie. John, did you have an experience with Alan Alda, or did he not appear? Was it just his writing, that you were reading?
No, he was, as you can well imagine, he was a real gentleman. It was terrific to be working with him. As I was listening to Alan say, to talk about your show just now, give a bump on your show, I went, oh my gosh, that's right, I worked with Alan. I was going to tell you that just now. But in any case, he was terrific. And, his interests are not unlike mine. They're very science-based, and this was an interesting show that was directed by Dan Sullivan. The audience really enjoyed it.
Yeah, another well-rounded individual. When we had him on the show, we were pleasantly, I'm not going to say surprised, I've never heard anything other than this, but, for someone that had never met him, for him to appear on our radio show and be as gracious and as you're being, and with his time and his stories, and we just had a great time with him. I thought he was so professional, kind, and fun to be with, and also had an experience with radio back in the day when he was in college. He told us some of that. So sooner or later, it all comes back to the radio in some way for us, and we enjoy that. And I'll tell you, it also kind of brings up a little bit about our show. Is Everything Old is New Again, and just a quick idea is our listeners know that we take a peek at entertainment, a little genre of entertainment each week, and we shine the spotlight on it, and we try to learn all about the history of that genre and honor the foundation, let's say, of each of the different genres of the things that came before, that what we're watching now has been built upon the shoulders of things that came before, and we examine that, and then we try to take a look at where that genre is going, whether it be H.G. Wells or anything else, and I wonder, is that something that that I know you're a bit of a fan of history? Is that something that you believe that our entertainment today or our pop culture is certainly based upon the foundation of what came before?
Well, it is. It's also based on the foundation of imagination and empathy, about being touched. Personally, I am less entertained by entertainment and more entertained by knowledge, and I don't I know that sounds sort of pretentious, but I'm more of a documentary type person than I am just watching a drama. But there's also the issue that there is so much available right now, and in some ways that's good, in other ways that kind of dilutes everything. So I don't know.
But as you can see with our take on it, though, too, in some ways, and we're experiencing it with you here, is that in theory we could have just sat here for an hour and talked about Q, and do you remember this episode, and what was so and so like to work with, and all that, with the typical kind of things. But I'm with you. I want to go beyond that. I want to learn more and continue to learn, and our listeners are along those lines as well. We're looking to experience more than the surface, and see what's behind the person and behind the topic and so forth. And along those lines, someone asked you once, I'm cheating a little bit because I heard this on YouTube, but I don't know if you even remember this, but if you could meet one person out of all time, alive or dead, you picked, at least at this particular time, Alexander the Great. And I'm wondering if you could expand upon that a little bit. I thought that was a great, interesting selection.
Well, I might have been reading at the time. There's a lot of discussion as to whether Alexander, who did more to create, as far as Western culture.
Right.
A lot of people would have said Jesus. Some people would have said St. Paul, and they're certainly on that list. But the reason that I chose Alexander the Great and others have chosen, is that he actually brings Hellenistic culture to that part of the world, and hence everything else that has moved on from there, or come from there. So I don't know. I mean, every time I read things, I kind of go, or see things, I kind of say, oh my gosh, wouldn't it have been great to be a fly on the wall for that meeting and stuff like that? So
that's kind of not a fair question. Maybe it's, an easier question, not for today, for another show and another time, is maybe the top 10 people or something like that. Because the pick one is it kind of pigeonholes you, and you're eliminating others that are a smidge behind that person, if you will, for different reasons.
Right. I'm not very good at being able to just play. If I had time to think about it, I think I could come up with a list that would be an interesting list that would actually indicate some of my interests as well.
Right, which also I think now just planted a seed here to a show for the future. If you're listening for Everything Old is New Again, you're going to be hearing down the line, David and I will go through our list, maybe of the top 10 of who, or even 5 who we'd like to meet live or not. I think it's a really interesting question. But let's go beyond, because along those lines, those are the kind of questions that you have at dinner parties here and there. And I'm wondering, I know you have every so often dinner parties at the house with Kate Mulgrew, Janeway of Voyager, and some others. Do you ever, run across the general public, when we're sitting by and listening to, a cocktail party with what we believe, are people that are admired and we see on television and are stars to us, we imagine huge conversations about huge topics, which I'm sure exist. But every so often, I'm sure you talk about just that pig in a blanket that just made, or whatever the food was for the day, I guess.
Yeah. Mostly what happens when you get a group of actors is that everybody wants to talk at the same time. And and so those parties are oftentimes very lively. And they're fun, and they certainly are that way when Kate is around. So we have a good time, and our friendship goes back many years. When both she and my wife were up at Seattle Rep, which is where I met her, and then that was back in the late '70s. So.
Wow, and we go back that far as well, and we don't want to say it was so long ago, but these have been great years and great times. And listen, here's the thing: if you're at one of these cocktail parties and there happens to be a lull in conversation, feel free to bring up Everything Old is New Again, and our website, everythingoldisnewagain.biz. If anyone wants to listen to something in the past of our shows, they're all listed there. And or if you'd like to have a suggestion of anyone to come on the show, feel free to say so at the dinner parties. But anyway, along those lines, something different that you've done that I feel is really interesting is that you sailed from California to Tahiti. And if you could just tell us a little about that. I mean, how many days it took, crew size, how big a ship, what inspired you to do that? It's a big question, but it's just so interesting to see and hear someone do that. That's very, very rare, I would suggest.
Well, again, stemming from my reading of Mysterious Island, as you can see, that was a really important book for me. I became very interested in the period of exploration, which is 1500s all the way through the 1700s, and so you had a couple hundred years there of sailing, and I read all about these people who did that and all the places that they went and what have you. And what's sort of fun to think is that when you get to a place like Tahiti or something like that, it's not going to be the way it was in Captain Cook's days. There isn't going to be that kind of wonderment of that they had. But to get there, you have to go over whatever it is, 5,000 miles of ocean. Well, that's the same ocean that Captain Cook did. Right. And there are all of the problems and the concerns and the sense of adventure and the danger and all of that type of stuff. So that was always something that was an allure to me and fascinated me.
We'll be back right after this break on Everything Old is New Again with John DeLancie. One more segment right after this. Come on back.
This is Everything Old is New Again, America's entertainment pop culture talk show with Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
We are back right here on Everything Old is New Again for one more section with Mr. John DeLancie, Q from Everything Old is New Again, certainly involved with Alien Voices as well, as also was involved with Breaking Bad and lots of programs. You know him from just about everywhere. John DeLancie. We're just getting into talking about sailing. Tell us a little bit about your boat. You have a boat, right?
I have a sailboat, and it's a blue water boat. It can handle. It's a really well known boat in the boating community, and it can handle that type of water. And two of my son's friends came, and then a friend of mine. So there were four of us. It was a little tight, but there were four of us on the way down. It took about 25 days, 24, something like that, days to get to the Marquesas, which I highly recommend. You really get a sense of being in a primitive culture. I mean, I don't mean that the people are primitive, but that there's an oldness about the island. I don't know. It feels off the beaten track, which it is. Then on to the Tuamotus, which is the largest island archipelago, coral archipelago in the world, and with all of those National Geographic beauty shots of extraordinary sights, and then on to Tahiti. I then pulled the boat out of the water, and then I went back, and a young man and I took the boat back brought it back from Raiatea all the way to Los Angeles, which was about 50 days at sea. We had a couple of there is when I was able to kind of have the experience that I wanted to have. It was not ultimately life-threatening, but it was scary. The first thing that happened, which was not scary, but it was to be able to fix it. The water pump goes out on the diesel. To be able to pull everything apart, fix it, and what have you was very satisfying. And then all of a sudden, one of the chain plates popped, and now they hold the stays, that the wires that hold up the mast, and now I'm in, like, this is serious. This is really serious. And being able to fix that, he and I were able to fix that in 3 hours, just pulled the boat around. I mean, just knew how to do it.
Right.
And then we hit not so much a storm, but certainly a high-end gale as we came out of the high up around San Francisco, and something had come down from the Bering Straits, and things were now they caught your attention. Yeah. The size of the seas were just, everything was catching one's attention, and had another equipment failure, and but made it back, and so it was a I had my adventure. I had my adventure, and I survived, and so it was great.
And to share it with your kids on the way down also must have been will be something they'll remember. That's for sure, for a long time to come, I'm sure.
Well, yeah. I mean, we would send out little missives, and all by single sideband radio, and doing well, moving on, all this type of stuff.
Well, what did you do for entertainment all that time, if you even had time for same?
Oh, no. You are on constant alert.
Right.
You are on constant alert, and on the way back, as I said, 4 was too many. It was just it was a nice time, but 3 would have been better. On the way back, it was 2 of us, and that's when you are doing 6 on, 6 off.
Right.
And what I was reading at the time, with all of these problems that and listening to every sound, and you're just on alert.
Right.
I was reading a book that I just happened, on my Kindle, which is an easy way to. So I would sit there at night and sit in the gangway and let the wind vane do its job, and the boat's moving forward at 5, 6, whatever it is, knots, 7 knots, just relentlessly 24 hours a day moving forward. I was reading The Martian, which was a great story for me because it was also a guy who was in trouble, who was trying to figure out how to get out of it. So
right.
it was fun. Those are the type of things which you and one of the things which I've always liked about sailing is that it gets me out of my head. Instead of grinding on, I should have done, or if I had only, and it gets me out of my head. I am constantly scanning and running scenarios, which is what most sailors, who really know what's going on, they're just running scenarios. If this were to happen, what would I do? And you run these things constantly.
Right, constantly problem solving, or at least problem anticipating. And
exactly.
Right. That's terrific. I mean, it's an amazing story. After you are done with Dover Intelligent Design Trial, maybe there's something there to share with us. Who knows? We'll see. 'Cause that is an adventure that I just think maybe because my dad had a boat, and we on the Long Island Sound over to Connecticut for 2-3 hour drive, and it was a motorboat, used to capture my attention. I guess this is capturing my attention tenfold or 100-fold from that. I just can't imagine. So, and we'd go over to Stamford, Connecticut, and pull up to the yacht club and have lunch and come back. So, but it was that 2-hour trip though in the ocean, it's a Long Island Sound, but on the water, just captured my imagination. I would suggest it would capture all of us in some ways.
One of the things in which you quickly deal with the reality of it, and that is that. Let's say that you are up at 6 in the morning, right? And it's sunny. And, two things here. As you get closer to the equator, there is less twilight. So at 5:45, it's like midnight. And then at 6:15, it's like daylight. So that was one thing that I went, that's
nature's alarm clock, right? I mean,
yeah. But the other thing is that so you've done 12 hours, and most people who have done 12 hours go, oh well, and now we're going to anchor,
right?
We're going to have drinks and stuff like that. No. The end of that 12-hour stint is just the beginning of the next 12-hour stint,
right?
And it doesn't stop.
Right. But the stories that you must have shared, I know it was tight with the four of you, though. I presume it was 2 of you on, 2 of you off, and switching it off and so forth. You sit there, and besides reading, I'm sure you're sharing stories and life stories and things like that with your kids, and all this. Not saying it's free time, but all this time that you have together. It really must have been a great experience.
Yeah. Now, yeah.
I mean, we could go on forever, but we're on a radio show that have some hard breaks here, and I apologize. But we have had a terrific time with John DeLancie. We thank you so much for your time. If you're listening and want to find out more about John DeLancie, it's very simple, JohnDeLancie.com. That's JohnDeLancie.com. And, of course, AlienVoices.net. I highly recommend taking a look at those radio plays on AlienVoices.net. There's a lot of stars that you'll recognize that co-star in the various shows. Even William Shatner makes an appearance on one of them, and of course Leonard Nimoy and more. So really have some fun if you're going to be fighting traffic or whatever. Trust me, get involved with these, and the commute will vanish. The time will go very quickly because it's a great listen. It's a lot of fun, and again, your kids are going to enjoy that as well. We're looking forward to the next experience, next time that we have to spend with John DeLancie again. This is Everything Old is New Again. If you like our show, please tell your radio station that, and if you're listening on a podcast at everythingoldisnewagain.biz, do me a favor, contact the radio station that's local and say, listen, I just heard a great show. Why aren't you guys carrying the show? Anyway, we'll be back next week. I thank you, John DeLancie, for spending so much time with us.
My pleasure, truly, my pleasure. Thank you.
My pleasure, too. And we'll be back right after this, this week. We'll be back next week to continue exploring all things entertainment, pop culture on Everything Old is New Again.